Welcome to Making an Impact. I'm Katie Mills, the head of Zeigo Power at Schneider Electric, and in this podcast, we meet incredible individuals from a range of industries to discuss the exciting projects they're involved with today, their career journey to date, and ultimately what impact their work is having on the world. In this episode, we're making an impact with Peter Robinson, lead waterways and coast engineer for the UK and Ireland at AECOM, who's been in the water and flood risk management industry for over 25 years. We're hearing about flooding more and more, livelihoods and home life put on pause and in many cases destroyed, the costs associated to flooding, and Peter's current project, the Glasgow Smart Canal, is addressing this issue. So welcome, Peter, to Making an Impact.
Thank you.
So to start with, tell us about the Glasgow Smart Canal. What is it and how does it work?
Yeah, so the project that we've delivered in Glasgow, and we call it the Glasgow Smart Canal, but it's a much wider piece of infrastructure than that, has effectively repurposed 18th century infrastructure. So the canal was built in 1790 for transportation of goods and materials, and we've utilised it now to be dynamic and smart, and we can talk about smart and what does that mean, around the management of surface water. So it's enabled 3,000 new homes to be built in Glasgow, very close to the city centre, in an area that was considered to be uneconomic to provide that kind of infrastructure. Loads and loads of benefits. So we've looked at creating something that's dynamic, absorbs the surface water, a bit like a giant sponge. It soaks up the water that's coming from the increasing rainfall that we're seeing, takes it into the canal, moves it along and takes it out of the city, improves the drainage provision that's already in there, reduces the amount of CSO discharges. We're hearing an awful lot about CSOs nowadays, very hot topic, and effectively has created a new purpose for the canal, give it a meaning, and there's a need for it, which means that it'll exist way beyond into the 21st century.
Awesome. And how long have you been involved? What's your role within this?
So this is a really long piece of my career. So I started working on the Smart Canal, or the concept of it, and understanding the system back in 2009. The concept was my eureka moment in 2013. I still remember where I was when I kind of thought and went, there's a different way about how we can do this. It went through, the development, the design, 2015, and went through into being built and put into operation, built from 2018 onwards and into operation in 2021. So it's taken a long time. It's gone through a very long journey to get to where it is today.
Okay, and let's dig into smart, right? You said smart means many, many things. And we hear about smart in many areas in today's society. Smartphones, smart motorways, all those different areas. What does it mean in this context from a canal perspective?
Yeah, so the canal it's a unique and incredible piece of infrastructure when you think it's 240 years old, built. So it was designed by Smeaton, who's considered to be the father of civil engineering. It has always historically operated in a very non-dynamic, certainly non-smart way. There's very low carbon footprint associated with it. Water stored, it uses rainfall, and it operates by gravity. So there's no pumping and there's no systems involved in it. So what we've done is we've taken a layer of technologies, and a number of different technologies, and put them onto the canal. So it's now utilising flood forecasting, rainfall forecasting. That's being brought through into a hydrodynamic model of the canal. So we understand where the water's coming from, what effect it's going to have on the canal, and it's being predictive. So the canal will operate autonomously. It will lower the water level in advance of heavy rainfall to then create that pore within the giant sponge I was referring to. It's smart. It's innovative in the fact that nobody's really done this with a canal for this purpose before. It's taken a number of technologies from other sectors and applied them in an innovative way to this piece of existing infrastructure to realise it.
It's great to see kind of older infrastructure and how you can modernise it by layering, as you say, kind of new technologies on top, right? So it's not, canals aren't innovative. They've been around for many years, like you say, but what you can then do with innovation is use the technology that exists and use it in a different way, right, to what it's kind of been thought of before. So yeah, really exciting to see. Okay, a little bit about you, Peter. Over 25 years in the industry. How did you get into the industry? How did you start?
So I'm a chartered civil engineer. I'm a fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers. And probably like a lot of civil engineers, it was an accident. When I was young, I enjoyed maths. I enjoyed STEM subjects, so physics and science. Really enjoyed geography. and I thought I'd be an accountant. My work experience was 2 weeks in accountancy, and I realised I didn't want to be an accountant. So I actually look back, and somebody else has asked me this question before. I look back at a point when I was young, and I have to thank my great aunt, Toppy. And she looked at me one day and said, "Have you ever thought about being a civil engineer?" And I was, "What's that?" And if she hadn't said that, I wouldn't be doing what I do. I wouldn't have done what I've done. And I owe her a huge amount of thanks, really, for just coming up with a really quirky idea. I've worked in the industry for a long time, and I get quite frustrated that people end up in the career by accident, and it's an accident that we've got to stop happening. So it's great when people are doing STEM activities, going out and engaging young people. And we also have a really significant gender imbalance as well in the industry that we have to solve. So, a few years ago, it was reported only 9% of engineers are female in the UK. It's a UK problem, and it's something that we have to actively tackle. So STEM activities, going out, and that involves not me going out and meeting young kids, because I'm stereotyping the wrong issue. We have to find the young, enthusiastic females to go out and inspire the next generation.
Yeah. And you mentioned civil engineering. For maybe younger people watching this, what is civil engineering? Right? What's the breadth of things that a civil engineer can do? Give them an idea.
Crikey. Everything. So if you imagine from the moment you wake up in the morning to the moment you go to sleep at night, you're relying upon civil engineering. So the water supply that's coming through, so turning the tap on, brushing your teeth, flushing the toilet, all of that is coming from civil engineering. The roads, the rail, bridges, buildings, power, energy. Civil engineering is probably very under-recognised for the importance it plays in the fabric of society.
And as a career with new generations coming through, if you truly want to have an impact on society, this is a great way to do it, right? You're touching society in all different varieties, all different aspects.
Absolutely. I mean, the canal project and putting all of that together leaves a legacy for the community, and it's about the people and it's about society. And if you imagine, coming back to your point about flooding and the disasters that are being faced, it's going to be up to civil engineers to play a really important part in solving some of those problems in the future.
And when we think of this project, what do you think it will do for kind of future opportunities in this area, and kind of any implications in terms of flood management and smart infrastructure? So
this it's quite interesting. I remember going to a conference and presenting the project to a group of canal engineers and said, "Should we make a canal smart?" And we had a poll, so we had them, basically voting online, and there was a resounding no came back. And I thought, oh crikey! So what we've managed to do is go through this and actually prove that this is an approach that can work. And it's a proven approach, and we are picking up on this at the moment. We had COP26 in Glasgow, perfect timing. People suddenly taking notice of this project and the thinking. The benefits of the project will prove that we can be smart with what we do and how we think it. But it's beyond just canal, and it's beyond flooding. By using the infrastructure that we have today is going to mean that we can have the least impactful options. So, people should be thinking about reusing every bit of infrastructure and repurposing it and diversifying it and getting the most out of it, rather than just knocking it down and building new ones. So the project's got loads of other benefits. So not intended as part of the concept. It wasn't one of the drivers, but we measured it afterwards and identified that it's avoided a huge carbon footprint by unlocking the embedded carbon that was left to us from the people who built it 200 and something years ago. So by going through and using that, it's almost a philosophy of using infrastructure and building infrastructure and modifying infrastructure that means that we can get the maximum out of what we can afford from the planet.
And what does this kind of project mean for the everyday person?
Crikey! So I think for me, and what strikes me actually in this project is being the kind of the community response. So it's been part of a portfolio of work that's been delivered in Glasgow along the canal. So the canals have been getting regenerated for 20-25 years. That has led to health benefits. People have started researching the benefits, blue, green infrastructure, access to open space. And during COVID, everybody appreciated what they had on their doorstep a lot more than everybody had done before. The community response to this project was remarkable, and it struck me. I'm an engineer. I'm not a psychologist, but you suddenly noticed people appreciating that they were getting more out of this. So whilst it's initially creating a community of people, new homes, then people are going to move in and establish new communities, there's already an existing community living around the area that positively responded to it. So the infrastructure is one thing. Actually, it's the ripple effect that comes after it that's the most important.
Creating that connection, right, for people to the surrounding areas in which they live, the environment in which they live, all of that kind of brings it to the forefront, I think, right?
Yeah.
So with any project, there are always going to be difficult decisions that have to be made. Different routes in which you have to go down and explore to what you were expecting. What are some of the key kind of pivotal moments in this project where things had to shift or your thinking had to change based on what you were kind of confronted with?
Yeah, crikey's trying to plot out the journey. It's been a long one. So that initial phase of understanding the system and what it was built for and how it worked was really key, and it led to the concept. So and that I refer to it as my eureka moment. And I remember where I was. It was Easter Monday, 2013. It was a bank holiday, and I went in the office and I got the whole place to myself and a whole day of free thinking. And it was whiteboards, and it was sketches and whiteboards and taking photographs and basically going, this is, I think, how this is going to work. Having that space and that time just to really let your brain work on something was really important. Then handing it over and giving it to colleagues who are now really good friends, and saying, can you demonstrate that this theory works? So they were working away in the modelling and doing all the detail in the background to prove it. And a concept that was then presented and multiple stakeholders. So this is a number of different public sector organisations have come together to deliver something like this, which doesn't happen too often. Public sector organisations are driven by their objectives and are challenged by financial constraints. And it's not getting any easier. But they all came together and realised that there was multiple benefits and everybody could benefit from delivering something like this, to the point of very senior people sitting around a table saying, we want this project to happen. And everybody agreed, we want the project to happen. And then it went off into what I would refer to as the wilderness years. So there was a big question mark. Could it happen? Wouldn't it happen? Lots of organisations said it should happen. Who's going to pay for it? How do we organise all of that? So, it's been a big part of my life, and it's been a big part of other people's lives as well. And there's a few champions that I would sort of notice associated with this project and have been along the journey all the way. One of them from the council went and looked at funding and different funding opportunities. So it's been funded by a number of different organisations. It's not one organisation paying for it to come in. It's a very complicated kind of financial model behind it. And when that was sorted out, it was like, brilliant, great, funding's available, everybody's agreed, this is how we're going to do it. And it led into then going and putting it in the ground.
Meet Zeigo Activate, your carbon reduction solution. From tracking to emission reduction, Zeigo Activate provides valuable insights and connects you with a network of energy solution providers to turn your ambitions into action. Wherever you are on your decarbonisation journey, our easy-to-use software gives you the customised roadmap and connections you need to reach your sustainability targets. Search Zeigo Activate and request your free demo today. We talk about need for innovation when we think about the challenges that are associated to climate change, whether that's flooding or whatever other challenges that we face. Realistically, this project wasn't new technologies. It was existing technologies that were being used in a different way with different thinking. How did your team kind of come together and react to that? How did you work together as a unit?
So we brought lots of different people together, and it was developed by AECOM as a project, but we had a number of different partners. So we tapped into local architects to look at design palettes and other bits and pieces for some of the infrastructure. I remember having a very interesting conversation with, colleague, peer, but actually quite a good contact, and I would call them a friend now, looking at flood forecasting, but from a regulatory perspective. So they were looking at flood forecasting for flood warning. And one of the biggest risks on the project was, is the forecasting good enough? Because the risk of not getting this right is quite substantial. And they said to me, look, technology in flood forecasting is moving at such a pace that by the time this gets built, it'll be really reliable. So, technology is moving on. And I think actually at the time, it was the conversations with lots of people who knew their stuff really well. So people who were working in the modelling, and the modelling changed and adapted and evolved. So the project drove innovation in the modelling because nobody had tried this before. The flood forecasting and the information that was going to come in, and then understanding. So we've taken people who've worked with, infrastructure and took it from a wastewater sector and brought it into a waterway sector. The modelling software is really around water management for water utility, so the regulated water industry. And then actually the team, when I look back and building up all the different components of the team, it's huge and it's really diverse. So it's, AECOM as an idea, but then, the people working it with AECOM, and then when you go into the supply chains, and it leads all the way. So, people who are building it or supplying the technology or supplying even just the components that come into that, it just keeps going. And everybody, I think, through those conversations, bought into the principles of what the project was and realised that it wasn't just write me a spec and I'll give you a piece. It was tell me what you're trying to achieve and we'll find the right solution for you, which helped. So it wasn't just we'll create something new. There were some elements of that, but actually it was we'll find you something that's been used somewhere else that's fit for purpose for this project. So it's definitely a big team effort.
And do you feel that feeling of purpose with your team was a big driver in what kind of got this project over the line?
Yes. Purpose is one of my favourite words. We all have to have a purpose. So I think, and even from the partners, everybody. So AECOM, we took this project and responded to an idea and a thought from a client organisation partnership, and then developed it and came up with things that were quite quirky. And we challenged them and said, well, we could do it this way and we could do it that way. There's a traditional way of doing it, or there's a innovative and maybe a new way, and there'll be risks associated with this, and you'll have something that nobody's done before. And some of those challenging conversations are still ongoing because partners are now having to take on pieces of infrastructure that they're not familiar with. It's not standard. There are so many technical waivers and bits and pieces that need to go through because it's completely different, but it pushed the boundaries. And I think it's created a shift in the mindsets of lots of different organisations going, why are we carrying on with what's okay when actually we can have what's best? And we're seeing it. So there's lots of other projects now around the UK and around the world where people are going, well, actually, can we do something that's different? Not because of this project, but maybe because people are realising that actually you can challenge what the norm is.
And purpose, you said you love that word. How has your purpose shifted from when you started out your career to now?
Crikey. So if I go all the way back to when I started my career, it was going in and solving a technical problem. I was an engineer. I wanted to solve that. What do I want to do now? It's much broader. It's so much broader. It's about facing up and challenging and meeting some of those challenges that we're going to face. So climate change worries me. The future and what we've got is going to be difficult. We're not mitigating climate change at the rate that that I would want, and probably lots of other people. We are going to have to adapt, and we're going to have to adapt at a really big pace. So, for me, it's much more about people than maths. It's about communities and people, wherever they are in the world, being able to live sustainably. We are going to see changes, so changes in sea level rise, changes in flooding. Population carries on increasing, and the pressures that are going to be on those people. And we're going to see a big shift, and we're going to see an awful lot of people needing to move from where they live unless we solve the problems for them where they are. And so the challenges are global. And yeah, it is a very, very different way of thinking.
What kind of demographic do you feel climate change is going to have the biggest impact on in the future?
That's quite a striking question. So we live in the UK in a very fortunate part of the world where we have a temperate climate. We have an economy that's doing okay relative to others, and not everybody's going to feel that or appreciate it. The demographics, climate change is going to hit hardest the people who are most vulnerable. So you just have to look around the world, coastal communities where there's high density living near the sea. So you look at the Asian continent, you look at small islands in the middle of oceans. Those people have had very little benefit out of what is causing climate change, and they're going to suffer the consequences.
And so do you feel we have a responsibility?
Absolutely.
And when you think about this project, you've been involved in it from the beginning. What impact do you see that this project has had?
So if I go back to Glasgow and have a look, I see the buildings going up. I see the community starting to form. I see people moving into houses where they are going to thrive. They're close to the city centre. There's lots of other elements associated with the fabric of the infrastructure that's being put in place, connecting them all up. The research that was done on the Glasgow branch and this part of Glasgow from where the canals had been regenerated over 20, 25 years, that was really striking in terms of looking at the benefit. So a little bit of background around that. The research has proven that those people who live within 500 metres of the canal have, over the last 25 years, improved their overall health from those people who live more than 500 metres from the canal, because they've got access to active travel, open space, the blue-green infrastructure, and there's science around the benefits of living or being on or in water. That was a bit of a celebratory moment, because there's a scientific paper that proves what my gut was telling me. My instinct was saying, if we build good quality open space, people will thrive. So I quite often refer, and there's loads of things going on at the moment about, biodiversity net gain, the biodiversity crisis, and it's there for everybody to see. And it's another one. It's another thing we're going to have to tackle. But I refer to the fact that we spend lots of time trying to think about what we can do and rejuvenate and regenerate our planet for the benefit of species, and we have to include the human species in that. So we have to go and start thinking about how we can help the planet recover.
And when you think of this project, a huge chunk of your career, I remember you saying to me it's like your third child, as your wife said. Yeah. What is the one thing about this project that you're most proud of? And what's the one thing, if you had the benefit of hindsight and had to do it again, what would you change next time?
Firstly, I think the team. When I look and think about all the people from lots of different organisations who bought into it, there was a number of people who could have just said no. If they hadn't realised and believed in it, it wouldn't have happened. So delivering it, and in fact, one of my colleagues she was the person who got the pack of photographed crazy ideas on that Easter Tuesday morning and said, can you see if this could work? And she turned to me and she went, Peter, have you ever had anything built? Because we'd worked on some quite quirky stuff. And I went, well, yeah, some things, but actually quite a lot of stuff I've ended up working on and has never actually made it because it's maybe a bit too quirky. So actually then getting people to buy into this as a thing and seeing it through, for me, is a real highlight. If I could go back and change it, there's two things I would change if I could get in a TARDIS and go back. The first thing, and this is a really big lesson that I learned, was trying to understand organisations' risk appetite. So we brought together 3 different public sector organisations who have different risk appetites. And if we'd taken those and put them on the table on day one and understood, we could have probably streamlined a lot of the processes, because so we've got a water it's not a water company, a water utility, Scottish Water. They've got a risk appetite statement and they're fairly low risk. And now I get that, because I turn the tap on and I give the kids a glass of water and I want it to be safe. And so do they. So they operate in a really kind of risk averse way, but we needed them to get on board as a partnership. Scottish Canal's risk appetite was, let's innovate, let's do, the Falkirk wheel was built because we want to do something different. We've got kelpies, we've got crazy, really good stuff for society, but with a very different risk appetite. And then the local authority as well. And when they came together, it was like a grinding of the gears, because people were coming at this with such a different perception, and it took a long time to unpick and get it to go, well, actually, we can all compromise a little bit. That would have led to the other benefit, which was about time. It could have been delivered in a much shorter space of time, but just going through the process, predominantly because of that risk appetite.
And getting everyone on board.
Yeah.
Ready to go forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Final kind of couple of questions. What is the impact that you hope to have on the planet? Just a small question.
A small one.
So, in years to come, what is it that people are going to say that Peter did and the impact that he left? And secondly, in your career now, what's next? What do you do now?
So my career at AECOM, I'm in AECOM 2.0 now. So I was at AECOM when we developed this concept, and I left and I went to work for Scottish Canals to see the project into delivery and into operation, which was quite nice. And I returned to AECOM. One of the big things for returning to AECOM is effectively we have our ESG strategy, which, environment, sustainability, governance type of strategy. Said everybody what's ESG, but actually we've got a really nice tag for it. It's called Sustainable Legacies. So for me, I would hope that I have left a sustainable legacy. I have had positive impact on things that I've been involved in. And that for me is a nice place and with a purpose. So my purpose is looking for projects that will improve communities and opportunities around that space. What's next? That's a really interesting question as well. Projects similar to this, lots of different areas that I like working in. I like working with people who are earlier in their career and helping them maybe shortcut some of the steps that I've gone through. So I've been working for a long time, and you look back and think, crikey, there's a lot that you learn along the way. And actually, there's lots of things that everybody learns, but we forget about them or we don't pass it back. So there's lots of different sectors constantly working, and people go, here's a really good idea. And it's like, yeah, but actually, you've probably found that somebody thought about that 10 years ago. How do we accelerate our thinking faster? How do we deliver more innovation, prove it, and then be able to come back? So to meet the challenges of climate change, we've got to accelerate the projects that we're delivering. And nobody benefits from a flood scheme until it's built. And flood schemes take too long. So the canal project took a long time. And there's lots of things in there. How do we get to the point where delivery happens? So it's not 10 years to see a flood scheme into the ground. It's 3 years, because people will get flooded in those 7 years that you've lost. And the impact is huge. It's detrimental to people's lives. It's actually, it's the carbon footprint of flooding is huge. And we're in a really quirky space where people say, well, we want to get to net zero. But actually, if we don't invest some of our carbon in a flood scheme, the do nothing has got an even bigger carbon footprint. And there's some really interesting conundrums that need to be unlocked.
Awesome. Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining us on Making an Impact. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I can't wait to see what you do next. It sounds like you've got some really exciting projects in the pipeline. So thanks so much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Katie.